Hello, everyone, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
I'm your host, Sarah.
And we are so excited to finally have made it to this point. We are previewing Star Wars The High Republic Wave 2. And joining us today, very special guest from the Geeky Waffle. She has her own new Star Wars podcast now, Space Waffles, which is a great name. We are joined by Arzu. Arzu, welcome.
Hello. I'm very excited to be here.
First timer on Friends of the Force. So exciting. It's always a good time. So we hope to bring you all the High Republic feels over the next hour or so. And we're going to be talking all things, what's to come in Wave 2, non-spoiler, to be very clear to everybody. So we have read most, if not all, of the material that's come out for Wave 2, which launches on June 29th, but we're not going to be giving anything away. So if you're kind of looking to see what to expect and trying to figure out if this is something you want to continue to invest time into, and also kind of what our general non-spoiler impressions have been, this is the place to be. So before we get started, though, Arzu, I'd love for you to talk about just some of your work that you do right now for those of our listeners who might not be familiar with, what you're working on podcast-wise and on your blog.
Sure. So I host Space Waffles on the Geeky Waffle Network, and that is our Star Wars focused podcast. And we started it because we sort of wanted a place to talk about like our niche Star Wars stuff, because it's stuff we couldn't really do on the flagship show. Like I wanted to be able to talk about books, for example, and like Candace loves Star Wars Rebels, and there wasn't really always room for that. So right now we have a mini series on Ewoks going on. So we're going through all the 1980s Ewok stuff, which I've never seen. And I don't think Candace has either. So this has been an experience, but that's what's going on over at Space Waffles. And then on my blog, I have been going through the Star Wars books somewhat chronologically. I'm mostly caught up on like the new canon. So now I'm slowly going through novelizations and through the Shakespeare adaptations while waiting for new stuff. So, and they're all very spoiler heavy, so I can't put any High Republic stuff up yet. I will, once it's been out for a while. But yeah, so that's what's going on at my site, which is rzud2.com.
Which is excellent use of the Star Wars name. Branding, inclusion, synergy. I love it. I'm just using all the keywords, but I'm basically just telling you that I really appreciate that naming.
One of my friends came up with it. She was like, why not this? I'm like, brilliant. Done. This is my entire personality now.
Yes.
Exactly. Love that. Love that for you.
You got to embrace it.
See, okay. So I also recently Brad and I watched the Ewok movies for the first time, and like, wow, what a trip. So I totally understand we're going through it with all the Ewok stuff, because it is really an adventure, and we have the animated series ahead of us. I'm not courageous enough to
I'm
to
the other
turn
way
that
around.
on.
I've seen the animated series and the movies I'm watching this weekend, so we can record stuff next week, but
Nice.
I've only seen the animated series so far.
I'll definitely have to go back
Get
and
excited.
listen to those episodes then when I watch it. Yeah, and get excited for the movies, because there's craziness there.
I can't wait.
I think before we dive into all the book talk, I would love to know what Star Wars publishing and books in general just mean to you, and how they affect your fandom.
So they are actually, for me, the books are the transition point from like passive Star Wars fandom to more active fandom. So I tell the story a lot, but I had lost, quote unquote, an argument about The Last Jedi shortly after it came out. And I'm like, this is not happening again. I need the information to win the argument if this happens again. So I'm like, okay, where do I start? So I just sort of looked up like the chronological like release order of the books. I'm like, let me just start there. And then I'm like, this is all kind of boring. Maybe this isn't for me. Because I started with Tarkin, which, like, no offense if you like Tarkin, but it's not the most exciting of the new canon. And then this was sort of right around like, Master and Apprentice came out, and then Queen's Shadow came out, and all this stuff sort of came out right then. So I'm like, okay, this I like, because this is like my era. It's the prequel era. It's my favorite time period. So I'm like, okay. So reading them all sort of helped me piece Star Wars together like a bigger tapestry. It filled in a lot of gaps in the story, particularly with the sequel trilogy, just sort of bridging original to sequel and how we got there and what's this larger world around this one very dramatic family. And it sort of filled everything out in a way that, even the shows couldn't really do, because those are still fairly close to the center of the story, if you will. So it made it made the galaxy feel bigger and richer and more like a tapestry. And that's why I can't separate them anymore. Like they are as much a part of the story as any of the movies are.
I love that phrasing. It feels more like a tapestry, because I think people often do overlook publishing, and it excites me so much, especially with the High Republic, because I feel it is bringing so many new readers in, because they're like, oh, the Jedi are cool. I've heard about the Old Republic. What's the High Republic? And it's a really great entry point, because you don't have to have the context of like, where does the Mandalorian fit in between episodes 6 and 7, and where does all this fit in together? And like now we're just going on a completely new adventure, and it adds to that so-called tapestry of Star Wars to say it is all connected, it is all very important, but you're getting something new that you can't get from film and TV, and you're not limited to a budget or like special effects and all these things. It's really just, the imagination is your limit. That's the limit. That's the obstacle. So if you can get past that, like anything is possible on the page. It's awesome. I'd be curious, what is your favorite publishing book that you've read so far within Star Wars? Do you have like a favorite or top 2 favorites? I know they're hard to choose. It's like picking your favorite.
Like my favorite child.
Yeah.
Claudia Gray is like up there for me. I think Bloodline has such a special place in my heart, because that was the first time that I really saw the connection between what you see on screen and the books, like the lines between, like, especially Ben Solo, who I adore. If you ever follow me on Twitter, you know that this is like at least 40% of my personality. Like seeing the lines of how he became who he is are so clear in Bloodline, because you don't really see him in the books, like after the age of like 3. So that's why Bloodline sticks out to me, but really anything Claudia Gray, and honestly, The Rising Storm is now like a top 3 book for me.
Yeah.
Like, so those are what stick out in particular.
Yes, and yes to that, because Claudia Gray is also my favorite. And of her books, Bloodline is the one that sticks out to me, because it was actually the first canon book I ever read. And as like, I guess we're starting really strong here. And I'm, on a roller coaster that's going up, because I read Lost Stars right after it. Those are just so good. So good. And Rising Storm as well. We'll get into it a little bit here, but like,
oof.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a one sitting book for me. I just
wow.
In one go.
That's very impressive for me, because I physically like cannot do it.
I regret it because it was over too quickly, but I just sort of put all other work aside. I'm like, no, we're not getting up today.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I think if you read it in all one sitting, you get all of it, and it kind of gets into the action and then stays there for a while. So
yes.
I totally get that. It's how I felt about Victory's Price. Yeah, I was like, I'll just read 50 pages today, and then I'll finish it tomorrow, because we were recording soon after. And then I got to page, like part 3 when it gets into the action, and I was like, I can't breathe. Like I have to keep going. And Rising Storm feels quite similar in some ways. Like there's no room to breathe, have to move, have to keep reading in order to like know what happens to everybody. So yeah.
And I got to quickly shout out you mentioning that Ben Solo is 40% of your personality. You are among friends here, so welcome. And yeah, the fact that Star Wars publishing can give you sort of that visceral reaction that you both talk about, and just, not being able to put down the book and keep turning every page. It's really cool how some of the stories we're reading feel just so quintessential. And it's like, oh, like, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? And you're like, actually, my favorite Star Wars story is a book, and I think that's really a testament to the types of stories that are being written. I personally have like really never been let down by Star Wars publishing, like maybe in 1 or 2 instances, but like in terms of the scale of how many things have been released, that's a pretty small percentage of losses, quote unquote losses. It's a near perfect streak for me. I mean, I buy and read every book, and I'm like, this is just too good.
And like, I feel bad for dragging Tarkin in the beginning. There's like nothing again, because it does fill a role. It does fill in like the background of this character. It's just, if that's where you're starting from, it's not the most obvious place to start. And it doesn't, I don't know. There are other stories that are sort of larger and that might be a more natural entry point. But like every single one of them does fill a role in the story. So I feel really bad for calling that one out, but it's just, that's the first one I read. So
Yeah.
I could definitely understand that though, because it's a much smaller, more niche story for this specific, side character. Whereas it doesn't come out swinging necessarily when like a story like Bloodline or Lost Stories, as I mentioned earlier, both have those points where you're like, oh my God, that has galactic repercussions and feels like a natural entryway into Star Wars publishing. But again, all good things. Yeah. We are now 6 months, give or take, just about pretty much, from when we got the launch of the High Republic at the beginning of this year. And I would just love to know kind of what both of your initial thoughts going in and then coming out of that time period were. I mean, for me, I was like a little cautious, a little skeptical. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be for me, guys. And then I read it and was like, oh no, you got me, guys. You got me real good, because I'm hooked for the next, 5 years of my life, or however long they continue to publish these High Republic titles. I am fully invested, fully in. And I just recall after finishing those first books of Wave 1, just being like, things are going to get bad. And I'm a fan of the heroes in our book. So I would love to know what your points of view are, kind of going into this era and then coming out of the beginning of it and thinking forward to this time period that we're now in.
So like Sarah, I went in going, I don't know. There's so many characters. This is so far removed from everything else. Like, I don't know that I will imprint on any of this or get attached to anybody. I have never been happier to be wrong. Because realizing like as you go and how rich these stories are and how rich the characters are and how much they have going on, you realize that you have like a vague idea of the end point. Like you will eventually end up in the Phantom Menace, but that is so far away that none of these characters will be alive by that point. Even just from old age, like let's pretend everything goes fine from now for the rest of their lives. They still won't be around then. So you have no idea how long, like not how long, you have no idea what's going to happen to them. And that is so refreshing for me, like in a Star Wars thing, because any of the books we read in publishing, because they're all sort of set prior to the sequel trilogy, you sort of know where everything ends up, but you don't know that about the High Republic. So that means there is speculation and there's, who are your favorite characters and what are your favorite like relationship dynamics and like the heroes and the villains. Like the villains that we have are not villains we have anymore, like post Phantom Menace. So what's their deal and what happens to them? And it's, I guess, a huge world of potential. So I love it a lot more than I thought I would. And they definitely have me for the next 5 to 10 to however many years.
Yeah. And I think this is something I could definitely do in other mediums as well. Whether it be, we've got comics, we're getting manga, we're getting children's literature, but like, the Acolyte, if there's some sort of animated project on the horizon or something like that, they would have me for those things too, because there's just so much to be told about every single one of these characters. And before we started recording, we were talking about I mentioned that I was like, yeah, Jorah Malley, love her. And we just don't really get a lot of her, but she's so incredible. And I would love to know more about her at the same time. So there's so much richness to each of these characters, which I think is just magical. And it's very scary to not know how it all falls apart. Brad, what about you?
Yeah, I will say too, we hadn't really addressed this, but there might be like some slight-ish spoilers from Wave 1. So I just gave one. So yeah, that's probably, I didn't even think to mention that, but I would assume for most people listening to this Wave 2 preview, you've either read some of Wave 1 or are familiar, but definitely like go check out all these books for yourself, because I think Arzu made the best point of like why I'm drawn to them is, we don't know what's coming. And I was getting so exhausted by just kind of getting the same time periods and filling in a lot of the same gaps and just kind of knowing what was going to happen and where it all leads. Because it does take a little bit of the intrigue and the mystery out of it. But to be able to, speculate. Speculation is the name of the game. I mean, we're doing that with Phase 4 of Marvel. We're like, okay, how is Loki going to fit into everything? How is the multiverse going to start? And like, that's exciting conversation to have. And like, even with that, we have some sort of context with comics. And then in Star Wars, it was kind of like, well, we know the Clone Wars ends and but now it's like, oh, how come the Nihil aren't around? And like, why are the Jedi so deep in their own hubris by the time of the prequels. They seem pretty thoughtful right now. Like what happens? Like what's the event that goes down? And for me, I was a little bit cynical on Star Wars. I think just with how certain things ended, and then like the pandemic kind of compounding those feelings for so long. And the High Republic for me is like the hook, line, and sinker back into being a full-fledged Star Wars fan, and just like trying to see the optimistic side of things, and like really leaning into what I love and kind of standing the hell out of it, because life's too short. You gotta love what you love and find joy in that. And not everything will be perfect, but there is something in Star Wars for everybody, wherever you can find it, is my thought. And I think the High Republic is definitely my bread and butter right now. It's so good. So damn good.
Yeah. I think for me, like coming into the High Republic at the top of this year, opening that book and feeling really good. I mean, despite all the fear and worry it put into my soul, was like the moment when I realized like, oh gosh, there's like legitimately a light at the end of this tunnel, not only for this personal rut that I'm in because of the pandemic, but also of like what felt like a drought or a me turning away from Star Wars in a bit of a sense. Like my relationship with it was strained. And while I'm not 100%, loving everything, it's not all for me, and that's okay. This, as you said, Brad, is my bread and butter. It is the thing I'm coming back to. It's the thing that I want to put on all the t-shirts I own. It is the thing that I would like to have, like, do all the cosplays of, get all the toys for, get all the art and imagery books for. Guys, Abrams, if you're listening, please make an art of the Star Wars.
Please.
Oh
please,
my
please.
gosh, yes, with Ian
I will
McKay
write
artwork.
it if you need anybody. I mean, not that you're hurting for writers, but like if you need someone, you have 3 people probably. I'm volunteering both of you guys as well.
Please do.
in this podcast episode who would just be happy to do it for a very low fee.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, where's the High Republic merch? That's the next thing I'm waiting for. Arzu and I have pretty great Funko Pop collections, and let me tell you, I need a geode Funko Pop immediately, like yesterday, like 2 days ago.
Martian Row Funko Pop, please.
Masked and unmasked versions.
What helmet?
Yes.
With the helmet with the like the pointies, or like the adventurous
Both.
helmet?
Give us all. Give us the chase versions. Just I'll buy them
There you
all.
go.
Keep them in the box. Cherish him forever. Oh, little baby, got to protect him. If you're looking for connective tissue between Wave 1 and Wave 2, the comics are where it's at. Like, I have never been like the biggest Star Wars comics reader. I've been reading everything since the new canon started back in, like 2013 or 15 with Shattered Empire. And this High Republic stuff is like the best I've read of anything in comics. It's so good. It connects to everything in a way that, like, when you're reading Wave 2, you're like, oh, that's from the comics, and like, oh, I understand that. And you don't necessarily need to read the comics to appreciate it, but it does deepen your appreciation even more. But the biggest thing this last week was Martian Rowe unmasked.
That handsome chiseled face.
Oh my god, I was thinking like Darkling vibes. Definitely gives me Darkling vibes, like the hair, everything.
It's like Darkling meets The Witcher, because I think he looks like Henry Cavill. So it's like Darkling meets The Witcher, and I'm not mad about any of it. that is a handsome space pirate right there.
Oh my gosh.
I just have to ask you about the color gray, because were you envisioning him that dark of a gray? Because I thought he was a bit lighter gray, but that's maybe because my room is a very light gray.
It's weird because some of the art has him almost like a bluish gray, and then some of it has him a bit darker. So I do think the panel where you see his face is a darker gray than he usually is, because like in the rest of the comic, like when you see his like hands or his arms, it does seem a little bit lighter. So I think his face is a little bit in shadow, but that's my thought.
And some people were speculating that he was like a Chiss because he was a little bluer on like some of the covers for the various comics, and was like, oh, what if he's a Chiss? Like, that would be kind of interesting. But I don't think we really know what his species is yet,
does.
Which the fact that has been withheld information makes it feel like it's going to be like a very crucial story point, and exploring like, like what is Martian Rowe's lineage and like what is that lineage's history with the Jedi and like how does that all fit together? And that's something that's kind of hinted at the end of Wave 1, where we know there is some history there, like between his father Asgar, which like Asgar Ro, like great. It feels like Norse mythology. It's like crazy. But that leads me kind of to my point here. Favorite characters from Wave 1 going into Wave 2. So Arzu, I know Marchion is like one of your favorites. Like always talking about him. I love that's the 60%.
The other 60% of my personality.
So I want to know from you, like why do you love Marchion so much? Like why have you grown close to him as a favorite?
I mean, I could make the joke about the angsty boy with the past wearing a mask and this just being a theme. Mm-hmm. But I think what I like about Marchion is he, in his respective group, so within the Nile, he stands very far apart from like from the Tempest runners and definitely from everybody else, is that they all sort of operate on the same wavelength and he's just kind of doing his own thing. And he's sort of above them, but not really. And his entire past is like shrouded in mystery. And we don't know too much about any of the Nile really, but I mean, he's got that angsty past. He's got this mystery object that we don't know what that is yet. He has this grudge. He has this thing with his dad. And it's all of this like really cool, like really compelling character stuff that they've dumped in the villain. And then in the press conference before they started, they're like, he's bad. He's the worst. He's like irredeemably evil. I'm like, I am listening. Like nobody is ever irredeemably evil. I don't believe it.
Yes. Love that.
So yeah, so that's what appeals to me about Marchion is the mystery surrounding him. Because like with the other Jedi, and there are so many of the Jedi characters and light side characters and like the heroes that I love. But with them, you see them operating in a community. You sort of have an idea of what their deal is. And then it's just picking apart their personal characteristics and their personal issues. But this man is quite literally an island. He is his own enigma that I find fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he immediately gave me Kylo Ren vibes, just the troubled history, hiding under a mask. And so that's why I think he's a fascinating character, because I want to know, like, what is that history? Like, why is he like that? And like for a character like Kylo Ren, he lived in the shadow of the Skywalker family his whole life. His dad was a smuggler. His mom was a princess and a general and a senator. His uncle is the greatest Jedi seen in generations, saves everybody from Darth Vader and saves the galaxy and is an esteemed figure, sometimes just a myth. So living in the shadow of like your family seems to be a very common theme amongst these masked characters, and like what are they hiding and why are they hiding it? And that's what I love.
Now, I just want to add one thing about Marchion, about his mask in particular, which I think is interesting. Going back to the High Republic, like the one that just came out, High Republic Adventures 5, is that, like even the mask itself to me kind of like tells a story, and maybe I'm reading way too much into this, but the mask he wears in that issue is featureless, which I thought was very interesting. There's no sense of where the eye is or anything. The only thing you see is like the storm painted on the front. So he is like this big intimidating guy, but his mask is like evoking he is nothing but the storm. He is the eye of the storm. He is the Nile. He is like a faceless threat, which I think is like, I don't know if he put that much thought into his mask. I'd like to think he did, but I think that's cool. Cause like, it's like Kylo Ren's mask is meant to evoke Darth Vader. It's like, he is not Kylo Ren. He is not Ben Solo. He is like the descendant of Darth Vader. So I just think in that too, they have it very in common, is they are identifying who they think they are through their mask.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a great observation. And I also find that mask to be super interesting because it reminds me, have by chance you read Saga by Brian Bond? Okay. So first of all, I would highly recommend it. They take inspiration from Star Wars, but it's this big epic saga. It's a graphic novel series. I got them from the library today to reread. But there's this character called Prince Robot, and he has like a TV face. So the same kind of thing applies, where he's like kind of completely featureless. And I mean, like he can use his screen to like emote and that sort of stuff. But like I find those characters very interesting because they have that sense of mystery. You're not watching their eyebrows. You're not watching who they're looking at because you can't quite see. You don't quite know if they're scowling or grinning or anything like that. And it makes them an enigma, as you said. But for me, I will say, I am not a Marcion Rose stan, as I know you guys are, and I respect it. I understand it. I appreciate it because it is all good. And Hope's Marcion Hose jersey,
brilliant.
excellent stuff.
Yeah, so good.
But I really am just here for Elzar Mann. I am an Elzar Mann stan. I find him just to be the best. And I don't know what it is because we don't get a ton of him in Light of the Jedi, but I think he's so interesting, and his relationship with Avar is like my favorite thing in the world. It's fine. I'm fine. I'm normal. But like chapter 23 of Light of the Jedi, where Avar is like, I could see he looks so happy. I could see myself like spending my life with him, but I can't think about it because I'm a Jedi and I have to, duty order. He would laugh at me if I said this, and I'm just like, no.
That's where the good angst is.
I know. I love the good angst. I really do. So I love the Jedi of this series. And the thing is that there are so many incredible characters to, watch grow and to get to see their stories play out. And so I'm in love with characters like Reath and Comac and Avar and Elzar. And I'm just so excited to learn where their story goes. And I feel like we're getting so many different kinds of Jedi and different kinds of heroes in this series. And I'm really, really enjoying that. When I heard the term folklorist used in Into the Dark, I was nearly flipping out of my seat. When Reath Silas said historiography, I was like, this man is my man. So I'm just glad to see perspectives of a lot of different Jedi who are interested in doing things a little bit differently or have a lot of different personalities and interests, because by the time we get to the prequels, and I love the prequel Jedi as well, there is a certain sameness to their mission, to their being, to their view of the Force, because they're stuck in this war and because they're stuck in this it's not a growth mindset. Is it like a stagnant mindset about their relationship to the Force? So I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential for the Jedi in this era, even though I recognize it's all going to go wrong.
Yeah, that's the thing that stuck out to me too with the High Republic is, you have somebody that views the Force as a song and as an ocean and a mountain and like a Warsher tree. Buryaga, my man, love the Wookiee Jedis in the High Republic. I mean, come on, that's amazing. But yeah, there is that sameness that you mentioned, Sarah, and I do want to know, like, how do we get to that point? Like, what do the High Republic Jedi go through that makes them so scared? And the authors talked about how the whole idea of the High Republic started with the question of what do the Jedi fear? And so I think that is ultimately where we're going to end up in the High Republic, is they are going to be so fearful that it's almost a path of inaction, of not caring whatsoever. And it's kind of ironic when you think about how fear is the path to the dark side. But the prequel Jedi are literally fearful, where they will sit up in their high tower and not do anything. Whereas these Jedi that we're seeing are out in the field helping people. And yeah, the Jedi aren't perfect. It is their golden age. But I think there is a lot of complexity to the characters that you don't get in that prequel trilogy. And so something that stuck out to me is like people were a little worried going into the High Republic. We don't want to deify the Jedi. That's something Luke doesn't think is a good idea either in The Last Jedi. They were mystified and deified, and that's why they had hubris. But this paints a little bit of a different picture to say, they are a little bit deified in the eyes of some citizens. They show up and they're like, oh, the Jedi are here, we're saved. But also the Jedi within the Order don't deify themselves as like, almighty beings above everybody else. And I think that's the kind of different mentality that they have. For me, I'm a huge fan of, I think you mentioned it, Sarah, is Reath, because he is such a different Jedi, where it shows you don't have to swing a laser sword and be powerful in the Force to make a difference. Like, everybody has their skill set. And for Reath, it's studying and knowledge And that can be as powerful as anything else. And even when he does need to rise to the occasion and into the dark, he is able to do so because he has the confidence and the wherewithal to do it. But he can still be specialized in what he does. And I think that really, and he has that whole conversation with Des. Des, yes.
I love my boy Des.
Yeah. He has that whole conversation with Des about how, just as we view the Force and, the Force is all different, the Jedi have to be different too. Or else it's just one monolith that kind of fails because, that's not what we're here for. We have to branch out and be different. Or else what are we really standing for than just being, one and the same across our entire order. And that's really cool. I love that. And I love Reed.
And you're like, interesting. And then you turn over to a picture of the prequels. Interesting.
Yeah, Arzu, how would you characterize the prequel trilogy of Jedi versus the Jedi of the High Republic? And maybe for somebody who is like a little skeptical still to go into the High Republic or is like not quite on board yet, even if they've read stuff, like what would your thoughts be on that?
I would say that the prequel era Jedi, I'm with Sarah on this. They have this level of sameness. And I think up until these books came out, we're like, oh, this is the Jedi at their pinnacle. Like this is what the Jedi are. Mm-hmm. But the High Republic like shows how rich like temple life is and how rich like training is in this order and how different everybody is. And I think Hope made the observation once, like Anakin is the type of Jedi that would have thrived in the High Republic because they do have that sort of flexibility that you don't see in prequel era Jedi. Is that, they do have their certain rules, no attachments, things like that, but they are much richer, far more interesting characters in the High Republic era. So if you like Jedi at all, then this is definitely the era for you. Cause you've got, Avar, who is very conscious of her role as a Jedi Master within the Jedi Order. And this is like her thing, no matter what she's feeling on the inside. Whereas you've got Elzar, who's a little like, I'm again with you, Sarah. I love this man. Like he is,
there's something about him.
There's something about Elzar. He's just, he's committed and he's in this order. He's in it. He's going to do the thing, but he sort of has a slightly more relaxed approach. Like it's sort of little, rules are meant to be broken and a thing that doesn't bend in the wind will break. And this is Elzar's approach to things. Whereas Avar's like, no, rigid towers do not bend in the wind. And Elzar's like, but what if they did? So like, but then they both thrive within this order. The order doesn't condemn Elzar for his feelings, at least not as far as we've seen. So they allow this sort of flexibility, which I think is really cool about the Jedi Order as a whole in the High Republic era. So, and then they do have, like the academics and what are they called when they take Jedi gap year?
Oh,
is it like a wandering year or?
No.
I'm thinking of Thrawn.
That's Thrawn. Wayfinder?
Wayseeker?
Yeah, Wayseeker, not a Wayfinder. That's something
else. Is that the thing that does at the end of Into the Dark when he's like, I need to reestablish
myself? He takes the Barash vow. That's different.
Or the Jareni.
Yeah. Well, see, so they have all that too. Like they have the people who take their intense force committal vows like the Barash vow, and they have the Wayseekers, and they do all of this, which is not something you ever hear in the prequel era. And granted, we only ever see prequel era Jedi at their extremes. Like we're never at the temple in Phantom Menace. They're barely on Coruscant. And, episodes 2 and 3 is when everything goes wrong. So we never really get to appreciate that. And I love that this sort of gives you the time to appreciate it. You see like adult Jedi thriving. You see the sort of Jedi school, like the students with like their school life, and Into the Dark opens with them, having a party, drinking the moonshine they made in the bathtub. Like,
yes,
like, so it's just a wide diversity of Jedi and like character types. So that's my recommendation to a new reader.
Well, it's very obvious that we've all had really, really good impressions of Wave 1. And I will just say first and foremost, Wave 2 is even bigger and better. I was just so surprised. And Wave 2 is going to really be a make or break for a lot of people because can the High Republic keep up that momentum? Can it give us something different that, like we said, makes us speculate even more, makes us wonder what's to come, and makes us want to read that next book and maybe Wave 3, which we'll talk about towards the end of this episode. But I am just so impressed so far. So I think at this point, we're going to turn it over to our spoiler-free thoughts of Wave 2 thus far. And then after that, just to give you a preview of what we'll be talking about, there are a couple of excerpts that have come out on StarWars.com, IO9, and Nerdist. So a couple different places that we'll link in the description of this episode. So again, spoiler-free thoughts, and then we will talk a little bit about those excerpts from the perspective of as if we haven't read these books. We're kind of trying to get into that mindset to not, give you too much of a wink wink or, give anything away, because we really want everybody to experience these books for themselves, most importantly, because we did, and it's part of the fun and the magic of this. But Arzu, I'll start with you. What are your impressions so far of Wave 2, and just how are you feeling?
I loved Wave 2. I think Wave 1 was fantastic. I wouldn't be here if I didn't love Wave 1, but they're trying to set up an entire era nobody has read before. Whereas Wave 2 sort of picks up where that left off. They are assuming that you have read Wave 1, or at least are somewhat familiar with it. So it just hits the ground running, and it doesn't let up, and you don't have any time to breathe. And it's fantastic, in a word. I cannot recommend it enough. Every single book in Wave 2. If you are able to, if you are so inclined, please read it.
George Lucas was faster and more intense, and Lucasfilm Publishing was bet.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, I will definitely echo all of those thoughts, Arzu. I think that this is an era, this Wave 2 really says to the reader, okay, you're in, so are we. So let's go. And it dives into a bigger scope, I think, of what the politics are looking like, what the world looks like, how this republic is attempting to function after this tragedy on Hetzal and with the Legacy Run. And it's kind of asking, the time is asking of the people in the Republic and the Nile, are you up for the challenge? Are you up for this threat that is ongoing? And maybe they're ready for that, and maybe they aren't. And I think it's really interesting to watch play out. And oh my God, these books.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that. Oh my God. I finished Rising Storm and was just laughing because I was like, I don't know how to react to the last 400 pages of my life. That was
how I was. I was like, I just had to laugh. I was like, that was the Adam Driver meme where it's I have to laugh. That was me. I was like, I can't.
What do you do with yourself after that book?
Yeah. It's crazy.
Here's the scary thought. This is what I've been thinking about this whole time is, okay, so after book 1, Elzar Mann is having visions, and they're bad. They're really bad. And I'm like, oh no, things are bad. And when we talk about this series, we really just say what can go wrong will go wrong, because that's kind of the point of it. But I really didn't know how much worse it could get, and how much more worried I could be for all of them. And the answer is just wow, so much more worried.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am terrified. I am just, what do the Jedi fear? What does Sarah fear? The same things as the Jedi, really. But
yeah.
Wow.
There is such a tonal shift from Wave 1 to Wave 2, because Wave 1 is very uplifting towards the end. It's yay, we got through the great disaster. Look at us. And Lena So gives this very powerful, moving speech on the Starlight Beacon, and you're supposed to feel oh, great. But like Sarah said, Elzar Mann's vision kind of crashes through all of that and is no, this is not going to go the way you think whatsoever. And what I love about Wave 2 is it really leans into the horror genre a bit, and even especially Cavan's The Rising Storm. And I'm excited to see what he does with the monster at Temple Peak, because that seems like it could be more horror-esque. And I'm excited to see how that might go. But Wave 2 introduces some of those complexities. We are the Republic. Does every senator believe that? Does every politician believe that? Maybe, maybe not. And, introduces some of those conversations that makes everything a little bit messier. And the Jedi are a little bit messier, because the question is, not everybody's going to deal with the great disaster the same way. We are all living in a COVID world. We are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel with, the vaccination rates and everything. But everybody's not going to deal, once we are officially out of this, we're definitely not by any means at all. But like once we're out of this, like how do we as a society deal with what we went through for so long? And so it's kind of relatable in that way with the Jedi. It's like everybody deals with the great disaster differently. And some people have like, a very life-changing view on the Jedi that they didn't think they would have. And some people are starting to go down paths they didn't expect, whether for good or for bad. So it was a catalyst event for the galaxy. And now Wave 2 is the Republic Fair, which is kind of the next catalyst event. Tragedy will strike, the Nile will show up. That's not really a spoiler. That's pretty much been out there for so long. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
on the cover.
Yeah.
There are Nile in this book, guys.
We're kind
bad things happen.
We're kind of following this pattern of big event, tragedy strikes. And the question is always going to be, how are our heroes going to rebound from that and react and change? And I think that's a pretty cool storytelling structure to have.
Can I add to the, now that everything has been set up, like sort of how the government works and the We Are All the Republic and all that, I love that in Wave 2, particularly in Rising Storm, you do get that sense that not only is not everybody on the same page, but there isn't that clear, there isn't that clear delineation between like, these people are right and these people are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at it from, so-and-so's point of view, you're like, yeah, I can see that. And then you consider it from the opposing point of view, you're like, I can see that too. And it's obviously not just two sides. Like there are several sides to this story and every side has a point. And I think that's one of the really fascinating things is, you look at the movies and stuff, and there is more or less that division of like light side, dark side, good, bad, right, wrong. But these books don't have that, like just within the government or, between the Jedi and the government, between the heroes and the Nile, like it's not a secret. I don't trust Lena So at all. So I think she's hiding stuff. I think she's a little sus, but, it's not me just saying that, there is stuff like in Wave 1, a little bit in Wave 2, like that does support, I would like to think, my theory. So I do like the political complexity of these books. It's not like inaccessibly complex, but there are many facets to it, which I really appreciate.
Yes. And I would say that it's those complexities that make it more rich and allow a reader to really kind of dive in and see, different points of view. Because like some of my other friends, like Marcy and Roe, I'm a big fan of the Nile. I find the Nile to be really complex. I'm sympathetic to some of their grievances and that sort of stuff, right? And for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of totally vibing with the Republic. I totally see the complaints with them, but they've got some interesting stuff going on, and there's a lot of gray areas within that, and I think that reflects our real world. There's a lot of gray areas within every aspect of our day-to-day lives, and there's not always one right answer and one wrong answer, and good, bad, black, white, these sort of one-to-one comparisons. And there's just a lot that's moving and shaking, and that all these different peoples from all these different places with all these different lifestyles and climates and that stuff, they all have a different point of view on who they are within the Republic or outside of it, and what they want out of their own lives. And I do think we get that from politicians, we get that from individuals, we get that from Jedi, we get that from the Republic itself. There's so much there that makes it really fun. And I think getting to see the writing, and I think getting to see characters that were created by one author and written by another in these from Wave 1 to Wave 2, and I assume we're going to continue to get that as this initiative continues, is one really interesting way to explore different facets of these same characters and understand them better from different eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been one of the standouts for me, as well as Justina is writing Claudia's characters. Daniel is writing his own character still, but he's also writing Justina's characters. And Kevin's kind of writing everybody's characters, because it's his book is sort of the linchpin of it all. I think of all the adult Del Rey novels as sort of the entree, and really the best part of the meal, because it's just really that it's really dense and it has a lot because it's covering so many different perspectives, and it builds out the richness of everything else. But I think it's so cool to see those characters moving between mediums. Out of the Shadows is exploring Vernestra Imrie from a young adult perspective versus a middle grade perspective in A Test of Courage. And like Sarah said, that adds depth. And Arzu, you made a really interesting point as well, just with like the fact that you can see everybody's point of view. And I think when we get to the prequels, everything is so polarized that even, Padme is like, what if the democracy we serving no longer exists, right? But I think it does exist at this point in the Republic's history. It does exist, the fact that people can sit down and have a conversation about different laws and different initiatives and kind of try to weigh the pros and cons of it, rather than just sort of side with the separatists or side with the Republic. And it's all driven by money and greed and, one politician, and eventually giving away that democracy. So I think we're still in those initial phases, and I'm excited to see like, when do we get to that point where like it is so polarized and it is very black and white versus gray. I think the Nile are going to push that boundary for the Republic until it breaks in on itself and tears it apart from within. And I think that's their strategy. And so that will kind of be really interesting to see play out over time. Do you kind of get that impression and really what Wave 2 is setting up that expectation?
Yeah, I do. Like, I think, we kind of go in knowing that if the Nile are like, we have to tear down the Republic, they're not going to succeed, because in 250 years, the Republic is, for better or worse, still standing, and we get to watch it fall on screen. But so in that respect, they won't succeed. So then it becomes about, what are they going to do? And I think you're right. I think it's going to become about fracturing what they have and sort of planting that doubt and planting that discord, so that it kind of, over the course of 2.5 centuries, kind of implodes on itself. And I think that that's going to be very interesting to watch unfold, because this is clearly a very, very slow burn when it comes to the downfall of the Jedi and the downfall of the Republic. So we get, several generations to watch this all happen. And I think that Wave 2 is already sort of planting the seeds of that. I feel like the Jedi aren't tipping over to their fall just yet. Same with the Republic. I think it's still, we're watching them on an upward trajectory. And there's going to be a point in the High Republic books where we see the shift happen, and we see it start to slowly tumble down to the world we know in the prequel era, where things become polarized and a little more black and white, and everybody kind of withdraws within themselves and becomes very rigid. Like, we're going to watch all this happen in real time.
Yeah, which
the politics
is terrifying. But what's so great about the medium of books as well is, like, if Wave 2 by chance picks off, what are words? If Wave 2 by chance picks up 50 years from the characters that we are visiting Wraith with right now, getting to learn about right now, it could do that. Mm-hmm. Like, we're watching this happen in real time, and we're also, because of the medium of books, getting to play with time, getting to fast forward or rewind as necessary. And I think it'll be really interesting as it all goes on to see kind of how we move along the timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say up front too that Wave 2, to give some context, does take place 1 year after Wave 1. So there is quite a bit of time. So that's another reason that this is so exciting, because it's not necessarily going to be a sequential thing. It's going to give time for our characters to sit with what they've been through. And I would expect maybe the same with Wave 3, is like, we're going to get a little bit of a time jump. And I love a good old time jump in Star Wars, because it just leaves so much more to fill in and maybe gives more mystery. I think that was something I missed a little bit from the sequel trilogy, was just that sort of time. That's what I liked between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, was there was a little bit of a jump, so our characters grew a little bit. And that's always really exciting, because then you get to that next book and you're like, what the heck happened? What happened? Why is this character thinking this way? I just was reading them, 1 book ago, and they were so different. So that's always really fun. And thinking about that, I think reading order is something that is on a lot of people's minds, knowing that there is such a time jump with Wave 2. Arzu, I want to know, from your experience, what do you feel is like a proper reading order? And also, like, which of these books really like stands out to you the most of them all?
So I think for me, for reading order, for both Wave 1 and 2, I would recommend read the Del Rey novel, the adult novel, because that's the big one. That's the all-encompassing. This explains the major event and gives you a lot of detail, a lot of information, and sort of everybody has a different point of view. Then read the middle grade book, because that's like a deep dive into like a couple characters reacting to this really big thing you just read. So it gives you kind of time to process it with them, because it is a lot of information in the Del Rey novel. And then, then you have a month, and then you have the young adult book, which is like in Wave 1, it's like removed by a few months. So, okay, now that's over. Everybody's sort of started to process it. So you've had a month to process it, and you can now process it with them. So I think the books very naturally take you through the same trajectory the characters are going through. And I would recommend the same reading order. So Del Rey, then middle grade, then young adult for Wave 2. I would also recommend, if you haven't and you are able to, once you are done the books, to read the comics, like if you can before Wave 2. You don't have to read everything, but I think, Brad, you were saying earlier, like you do get a little bit more added context, and just, it also does help from a visual point of view to know who's who, because you get to see pictures, and there are a lot of characters. Like, it's not just the Martian face reveal. Like, I genuinely do think that the comics tell like a very, very good story, particularly my somewhat spoiler-free comments. Like, if you have to pick one, read the High Republic Adventures before Wave 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely the best place to start. I think Cavan's High Republic comics will start to play a bigger role in the next wave of stuff, I feel like, because there is a lot of really good story happening there as well, and some crazy stuff that's sort of referenced in Wave 2 but isn't fully explored, because there are some characters that don't really make a huge appearance in Wave 2, and I think they're saving them for that capstone event for Phase 1 of the High Republic. And I think that's kind of where we're leading. I think that reading order is great. I will say too, whereas the young adult novel for Wave 1, Into the Dark, was sort of occurring simultaneously with the events of the other books.
Oh yeah.
This young adult novel, Out of the Shadows, is like a month or two after the events of the Republic Fair. So I would just put that disclaimer out there. Like, you definitely don't want to start with Out of the Shadows, because I think you'll be a little bit lost. So,
is there a time jump in Into the Dark? I'm wondering why I thought it was a couple months after Light of the Jedi. Is there like a little time jump? Am I just making this up?
I mean, they start right with the
Great Disaster,
with Jorah and Reath in the prologue, and then he finds out about her death like midway through, I think, when he goes back to Coruscant. Right. So I think it still does extend a little bit after the Great Disaster, but like cool. Out of the Dark is just like drops you right into like, it's been months, and they're all dealing with the events of the Republic Fair. Like, how do we rebound from that? So it's kind of a bigger time jump. Yeah.
I will also suggest, just to throw a wrench in, not to read the YA first, because I think that would be a very bold choice that I wouldn't recommend, because again, they are telling a bit of a different story, and for the second one, that's later. But I think you can read the middle grade first if you're saying to yourself, okay, I kind of want to ease myself into this next part of the story. I want to ease myself into Wave 2. The middle grade is telling a much slimmer, more narrow story than the Del Rey novel. And so in reading Race to Crash Point Tower first, I didn't feel that I didn't understand what's going on. The action that happens in that book is adjacent to what's happening at the Republic Fair, but not having read the Republic Fair yet, I didn't feel like I was losing out on anything. There are a couple moments that cross over between those books, because they are happening concurrently, that are really exciting and fun if you've read one or the other. So while I would generally recommend reading the Del Rey novel first, I don't think you have to in order to enjoy Race to Crash Point Tower, or in order to get the full picture of that story as well. But I think the rationale you've given, Arzu, for that particular reading order totally makes sense, and is probably the best way to do it.
In Wave 2, the Del Rey and the middle grade do overlap. Like, I just agree with it. It's so cute to see it happen, because when I did watch it happening, I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, this is probably Race to Crash Point Tower. And then I kept going, and then I got to Race to Crash Point Tower. I'm like, there it is. There's the missing scene.
Yeah, see, I did the same thing, reading Race to Crash Point Tower first, and then going into Rising Storm and being like, there's that moment. There it is.
I understood that reference.
Yeah. You're like, I know him so good. Like he is friend.
Like, why aren't you introducing this character? I guess we're leaving. Okay. And then you get to the next one. I'm like, oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Well, in Wave 1 too, a lot of the stories were removed from each other because like A Test of Courage was on a remote planet, and like Into the Dark was on a remote and abandoned space station, and then Light of the Jedi was the bulk of the story, like we're talking about, kind of all encompassing thing. So yeah, I do love that too with Wave 2. It really weaves together more, and you get those moments, like you said, the Captain America reference. You know, I understood that reference, and that is always fun in Star Wars. I'm always a proponent of interconnectivity as long as it works, and I think now that we're doing that within the book medium between different authors versus just one author having their own trilogy to work with, that makes it even more exciting, because it just goes to show the collaborative process that happens, and like how different authors get to borrow characters from each other. And it's not just like, oh, Claudia has to only write Wreath. No, Justina can also write Wreath as well. And you get these overlaps, and that's always great. With that being said, we're going to move into the excerpts section of our episode. So if you don't want to know like anything whatsoever, we're going to put timestamps in the episode notes in the description. So if you just like want to skip to the next Q&A section, we took some questions from Twitter. You can go there right now if you don't want to know anything. But again, these are all excerpts that are publicly available, not based on having an arc or anything like that. So all the links will be available if you want to get that taste of what's to come. So again, I guess spoiler warning for these excerpts specifically, but we're going to be approaching them simply from the excerpts themselves and not influenced by any context outside of that. Full disclosure, we have read these books. We were not going to spoil them. Okay. So let's start with Elzar Mann, the man of the hour. Indeed, he's hot. I thirst for the man. Quite literally, he's just great. So this was an excerpt from StarWars.com titled "Elzar Mann communes with the Force in the Rising Storm." So, Sarah, you have some really pressing thoughts. I want to start with you. Go ahead, take the floor. Your favorite character.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
This is a direct question to Kevin Scott. The question is, the screams had never left Elzar Mann? Excuse me? Excuse me?
The first sentence of the book.
I'm sorry. I have to get to a stopping point. I've read the first sentence and now I am. Excuse me? I'm sorry, but that is like the scariest opening of a book to an Elzar Mann fan, such as myself, I have ever read in my life. Not that I've read other books that have openings about Elzar Mann. However, this is about as bad as it can get in terms of fear factor. I worry for this man. I do not think he's okay. I think he ought to get some help, therapy, perhaps. I can send him a couple names in his area if he needs it. But like, Elzar Mann is not okay. And then we go a little bit down in this excerpt, and he's like, the eyes of the galaxy have been upon, everybody, and Lena So, and then the leader of the Galactic Republic, and then from Avar, his Avar. I hit my microphone as I was saying that. I was so passionate about it. Okay. His Avar. And I'm like, Kevin Scott, I have a second question for you. His Avar? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Oh, man.
And I felt like this opening was directly intended to hurt me. I was so overwhelmed to read this.
Yeah.
It validated my little cranberry heart. And it also made me very scared for the Anne of the cranberry.
Yeah.
And I need to know what your thoughts were on just like literally these first 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, full disclosure too, Cranberry Danny from the Rogue Padron podcast, they came up with that great ship name. I'm appreciative of it. Just want to say that. Because we originally were saying Cranstands in our Light of the Jedi.
Well, yeah, Cranstands.
But Cranberry is definitely superior, by the way. Like, way better. So, thank you, Danny.
The ship name is Avzar, and we are cranberries.
All right. Arzu, where are you in your Elzar Man feels? Like, how did you feel? Like, you're like, oh, I can't wait to read a Star Wars book. And you pick up the book and that's the first sentence you read. And you're just the, I'm in danger meme.
So I guess in this case, I am also a cranberry, but
yes.
So, okay. In my Elzar Man, I love Elzar. I love Avar, and what little we got of Stellan. I just like the potential of Stellan. Like from the beginning, yes. I have loved the potential of this pseudo Obi-Wan, pseudo Ben Solo man with the crossguard sword. I'm just like, my heart.
Who's just so handsome.
He is. It's
everybody
unfair.
acknowledges that he is just very good looking.
It is unfair how handsome this man is. So that's where my heart is, truly. But okay, these first 3 paragraphs, let's talk about it. We start with pain.
Yeah.
And then I don't mean this in any kind of insulting way. I mean, this is the highest of praise. But that really nice, angsty fan fiction that is going to make you hurt?
Yeah.
That's what his Avar feels like. I'm like, oh, good. Mm-hmm. A world of pain.
Yeah.
Coming my way.
You're like, this is exactly what I'm signing up for today. Thank you, Jesus.
Honestly, though, I cannot speak highly enough of what a strong opening this is, because we sort of know Elzar already. We ended the last book on Elzar in pain with the screams, and the screams have never left Elzar. They haven't left us either, because if you're going right from Light of the Jedi to this, it's just one sustained scream. It's been screaming for the last 6 months. So pain, I guess, is what this all comes down to, is pain. And I mean that in the best way, like when a book hurts you at this point. I'm just like, okay, I'm in for this ride.
Yeah. When I talk about fear, I just want to be very clear. I am talking about fear as an enjoyable feeling because I'm loving reading these books, but boy, do I worry, but not in a bad way.
Yes.
Not at all. It's
a good worry.
Yeah. I think out of all of the excerpts that have come out, this definitely is the biggest exclamation point, which is why I think we're starting with it, and probably we'll talk the most about it here, but it's such a statement to start with, to say do not turn back now, do not continue on. This is your final warning. And I really, just based on this alone, I really get the sense that Elzar is a Anakin type figure in the High Republic. And the trio in general is very Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme-like, between him, Avar, and Stellan. So I really do get that impression here of just, again, the Jedi having visions of the future, premonitions, being very disturbed by what he sees, but not quite understanding what he's seeing. And then to try to seek out the answers. He, at the end of this excerpt, he goes into the waves of the Ashla moon, which is, funny because the Ashla, I think, was the original name of the Force, when the Ashla and the Bogan, I think. So there's a little bit of...
They still use in Rebels and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that alone is so cool, but to see him plunge himself deep within the water and try to find the answers, that's such an Anakin thing to do, to try to make sense of what's going on. I need the answers. Tell me what's happening. What is this? He says, speak to me. It seems very almost like Shakespearean. I could imagine somebody on Broadway playing Elzar Man and having this monologue with the single spotlight on him, and he's just speak to me, and he's shouting at the crowd. And that just goes to show the power of this writing. And I think Cavan Scott is just brilliant. He is just so good. He needs to write so many more Star Wars novels. He's just great. This is one of his strongest pieces of writing I've seen in Star Wars, besides maybe Dooku Jedi Lost.
All right. Somebody call up Ian Dusher. It's time for a High Republic Shakespeare.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because you just were talking about on stage, soliloquize.
We're trying.
We're just talking about on stage soliloquies, single spotlight, Elzar Man. And here I am, I would watch 2 hours of that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yes.
Yeah, this also reminds me a little bit, this moment of him being alone on this beach and trying to find the answers in the waves. Reminds me another one of my favorite things, Frozen 2. And I say that with a happiness and respect, because there's that moment when Elsa is kind of on the beach and she's going to run into the waves and try and get to find her north, find her home. And she kind of is not getting it at first. And I think Elzar is kind of there in his discovery. He's not quite figuring out what the answer is until the very end of this section, where we get that he now understands the name Valo, the planet. So there's just like a lot of mystery and a lot of intrigue with this opening, which I just think is so incredibly strong and frightening and totally sets the tone for everything that I imagine. Like, it totally sets the tone for the rest of the book, ultimately.
Yeah. And I will say too, I was worried we weren't going to get a lot from Elzar in this book because Ty Yorick and Stellan and Belle were on the cover. So I was like, oh, it's going to be a book very focused on them. No, you still get so much more beyond those three characters. You get a lot with them, a lot of depth to those characters, but there's so much more. So if you're kind of worried and you're just like, oh, am I going to get Elzar? Am I going to get these other characters? Yeah, you get a lot of a variety of stuff in this book. So prepare yourself for that. And I think starting with this definitely tells you that right off the bat. So much more to come with Elzar. Very excited to talk about kind of what he goes through in this book. So Arzu, I'd love to turn it over to you. We got a couple of other excerpts here. Was there any that stick out to you that you want to talk about? We have a couple to choose from.
Other one I'd read before I read the book. And the first thing that struck me is that we are getting backstory, not a ton of backstory, granted, but we do sort of get a sense of his life beyond the Nile. We meet his cousin, Kufa. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So we meet his cousin, Kufa, and he's got some deal. There is a shrine. And then that's when I'm sort of like, okay, it's not me projecting my interest on a character. There is actually something here beyond the Nile, beyond him being the eye. Like, I don't know. So this sort of, I guess, validated my interest in the character, because I'm like, okay, there is a richness to him, and sort of him being on this frozen tundra of a planet, with his people.
Yeah. So, added a little bit
yeah.
of intrigue, and we have this new character, Udi Dis, who is I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that, but he is a force sensitive Talortai.
A bird.
Yeah. He refers to himself as a navigator and a pathfinder, which made me think of Thrawn in the Third Sight, because I think we've only ever seen those two words used in the Ascendancy trilogy. Which is exciting. So I'm like, I wonder if there's any, I wonder if he's from the unknown regions, and
I'm
if
convinced there's a connection, just because of, like the paths that we see in Wave 1 that Mari finds, and then the Skywalkers in the Thrawn trilogy. I'm like, there is a connection there.
Yeah.
That we have not explored yet.
Yeah. I would be, I'd be curious if there is. I don't doubt it, honestly. And I have to shout out the one sentence here, just on the topic of Marchion Ro thirst. I cannot go without mentioning this. It says here, quote, "And yet there was something in the face of this woman with its strange tattoos, so similar to the lightning bolts of the Nile, that was familiar, even if Ro looked like he could snap her like a barium reed," end quote. Poof. I would let Marchion Ro snap me in half. I'm just saying.
Could absolutely snap me like a barium reed, whatever that is. He has my permission.
Yes. Same here. I just love Kevin bringing that into the fold. I'm just like, yep, give it to us. Feed the rats on schedule, and we won't be sick. So I do love that. But Sarah, what did you think of Marchion Ro in this excerpt? Anything stuck out to you?
This excerpt also gives us a bit of a description of what he looks like, which, if, as Arzu mentioned, read the Star Wars Adventures comics if you haven't already. We do get that face reveal at the end of issue number 5, but it also reads in this excerpt Beyond that, no one knew much about Ro's lineage or even his species with their slate gray skin and pitch black eyes. And just the way that he's described in that moment, the slate gray, which, you know, people can assume is a very dour kind of low mood kind of color, along with like the pitch black eyes, which suggest mystery and darkness and a sense of distrust, perhaps. I just think that it's very interesting that he's finally getting a description and finally getting an image alongside, you know, just his might that we get so much of in the first book. So that's what stuck out to me, that he is such a mystery still. And even if we're getting Kufa, who is his cousin on this planet, and the shrine, we still don't know who he is. Mm-hmm. You know, he's not opening up to Kufa 100% either. So I mean, you described it perfectly earlier, Arzu, as like, and I've never really thought of it in this way. Like, he is an island. He is so completely removed from everybody else. And he does that, I would imagine, a lot for survival, because he has to keep the secret of the paths and he has to maintain the secrecy in order to hold the power. But it's interesting to get more from him specifically and understand where his ambition comes from and what he's searching for in his ambition. And I think we begin to see that in this, you know, why are we going to the shrine? Why is he going back to somebody who he hasn't seen in so long? Mm-hmm. Somebody who he's clearly tried to distance himself from, his cousin here. You know, she says, "We have missed you. When we received your message, the elder barely believed it. Although I would rather see your face. It's been so long." So it's really just a lot of disconnection between him and his people and his family and his planet, and him and the Nile and the galaxy broadly. Does he have any friends or true allies? No, I would imagine not, because nobody can be fully clued in on his secrets. Nobody can, you know, fully trust him, or he doesn't trust other people fully because he is the one sitting atop the throne, you know, and you don't want anybody to usurp the throne.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's interesting that the way he is described here and in Light of the Jedi sort of changes based on the context. Like here it's, you know, like this like gray skin and the pitch black eyes and, you know, something about how he looks like this old woman, like there's this familiarity between them. But then, so this is like defining him in relation to his family. Whereas in Light of the Jedi, when we get the description of him, like I distinctly remember his eyes being described as like predator-like. Like he's described as terrifying and a monster because these are the Tempest Runners describing him, like loosely, like, you know, third person, whatever. But so I do think it's interesting that this guy is so like such an enigma that depending on where he is, the way he is viewed by others, just even physically changes. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah. It's just so interesting how all this is mentioned. And it just continues to add to the enigma that Marchion Ro is. And I love that they're not showing all of his cards all at once. And I think this is a character that's going to be around in the long game for the High Republic and really just be a force to be reckoned with. You know, he is the eye of the storm, so he is somewhat protected by the storm around him. And if I would imagine if the Jedi want to get to him, they have to go through a lot. So I think that's kind of the benefit of being somebody that is a little bit removed and, like Sarah said, doesn't have a lot of friends, doesn't have a much of an inner circle. It's just him and the Tempest Runners, and that's how they operate, and that works for him more so than it works for them.
I bet you he doesn't have a game night.
Yeah. No.
Or a regular dinner party.
No.
Or, you know, maybe like
no group
he and his friends don't go play a sport on Saturday mornings, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty rough.
Arzu, what do you think?
Pretty lonely way to live.
What do you think Marchion Ro's choice for game night would be? What board game is he busting out for the Tempest Runners?
Monopoly.
Yeah.
Monopoly.
That's why he has no friends.
Yeah.
He's that asshole that buys Park Avenue and puts like 5 apartment buildings on it. So like every time you land on it, you got to pay him like $3,000.
He's like, I am bankrupting you, and that is how I'm winning the game. Thank you so much. Yes, I don't care how many times it takes for you to go around the board.
Like, I dare you to say something. Go ahead. Nobody does.
Kassav goes to jail and he gets a get out of jail free card, and Marchand Ro's like, I'll take that. You're not getting that card. I hate you, Kassav.
It's Monopoly if it's board games. It's Mario Party if it's video games.
All right. Ooh.
Oh my God.
I do love that. Marchand is a man of taste, and also he's a fashion icon.
Mm-hmm.
On the hard, okay, he plays on the hard level, and he also plays on the lava map.
Yes.
For Mario Party.
Oh
yeah. He's like, I'm choosing the level, I'm choosing the map every time, and he chooses that one every time. And everybody's like, can't we play the other like game boards?
Yeah.
And he's like, absolutely
not.
not.
There are no other game boards.
One final thought
I'm
here.
sorry, I derailed this.
One final thought here is the fur-lined cloak that he's wearing. Again, just speaking to those Darkling vibes. Oh, jeez. Like, I know I would love to see Ben Barnes play him, but like Maggie made a great point. Is like, I don't know if like Ben Barnes could snap me like a barium reed. So I think like Henry Cavill is probably, or I was thinking like Joe Manganiello would be a really great choice as well for Marchand Ro as a fan cast. Do you guys have any fan casts for Marchand while we're Henry Cavill still.
Henry. It's since the beginning. I took one look at those arms. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then they're like his long hair. I'm like, so The Witcher then. Got it. Like I'm like, that's it. That's where I'm at. So it's been Henry Cavill since the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
I don't have any fan castings. I'm not really that exciting. I can't really picture.
Do you have an Elzar fan cast?
Ooh.
No.
Mm.
I'm not a good person for looking in my brain and saying, "Oh, that actor should."
It's tough.
Should play them.
It is tough. I'll be honest.
I have a very difficult time with this too. Nobody has a face when I'm reading a book. So
yeah. I just and it's interesting when you look at art of these characters, and then they do have faces, but the concept art drawn by different people, they have slightly different faces, and so I don't have like a face in my head because I see these different faces and I recognize them as like Stellan, my handsome bearded boy, and Elzar, my handsome not bearded boy. That's kind of what I do. So I'm terrible at fan casting. I wish I was cooler and like could make cute mood boards and stuff with it, but like I'm not.
I'm right there with you. Like I can only fan cast if somebody's like, "What is your fan cast?" And I like think about it removed from the context of the book. But while I'm reading, it's been like this since I was a kid. Absolutely nobody has a face. Even if you make a movie out of the book, when I go back to read the book, they still don't have a face.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even visualize the actors. They're just not there.
I'm with that.
Fair enough. Yeah, people are like, "Oh, that was the perfect person to play that." And I was like,
okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. But I could see Ben Barnes. I get that he's not like like a big, large person, but like
he could bulk up.
He can kind of do that. Like
he could attack it like Adam Driver style. Just eat like 7 rotisserie chickens every day and just bulk up. Go to the gym, Ben. You got this. He would lean. Let's just say there was a High Republic show. The way that he is leaning into Darklina during all their different interviews, like he would lean into the Marchand Ro thirst for sure. Although I think Henry Cavill would too, because like Henry Cavill building that PC just felt so personal to me. Anyways, before we get derailed in this conversation and start thirsting for everybody, because it will happen. I will just note the final 2 excerpts. I think in the essence of time, we'll mention them, and if you guys have any quick thoughts on those, but there's a Ty Yorick one and a Bel Zettifar one. I think the Ty Yorick one doesn't really give too much away about her character, just kind of maybe sets up a scene that's early on in the book. And just this idea of how she is somebody who tries to help people, and especially desperate people at that. And for Bel, this excerpt paints him as somebody who is still reeling from the loss of his master Loden Grainstorm in the Light of the Jedi, because we know Loden is taken by the Nile at the end of that book. And from Bel's perspective here, he thinks he might be dead. He doesn't really know. But his new master is Indira Stokes, and she gives him this quote, which I was just so happy about we should never be a slave to our emotions, and it's natural to miss him, but we have to acknowledge, embrace it, embrace the hurt, but we have to let it go, most importantly. And she says, no one is ever really gone, no matter what happens. Loden will be with you now and forever. He is a part of all of us through the Force. So I thought that was beautiful. I thought it harkened back to Luke's quote in The Last Jedi, which is my favorite Star Wars quote for sure. My Ben Solo heart loves that quote. But I would love to hear, Arzu, like your thoughts between either one of these, kind of whatever pops to mind or what you want to mention before we turn it over to the other two excerpts to close out.
I think just on the note of Bell, I, looking at this excerpt, worry about him because if it's been a year, and I know a year is not very long to deal with grief, but if it's been a year and he is still at that point where he is at war with his own emotions, to the point where his new master has to point that out, like, I worry about him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm worried about all of these characters because it's just an incredible amount of loss in a circumstance that doesn't give you the space to really deal with it the way most people would. So that's my main takeaway from this, is worry for Bell.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same. I really feel like he is still struggling, and rightfully so, because like Loden's loss in Light of the Jedi is so devastating. You see them work through that the falling problem, you know, the jumping essentially and landing on your feet throughout that book, and then Loden finally trusting him, and Bell trusting himself. And I'm glad that Bell has the comfort of Ember, because we get a little bit of that.
Yes.
In this excerpt, which is so great, because beside him, Ember stirred. The Charhound had been sitting patiently at his feet, Bell's constant companion since they had left Elfrona. And I was like, precious, the best. Like, Ember deserves the entire world for like being there for him. But right after that quote that you mentioned, Brad, like, he is part of all of us now. And Bell's still getting really emotional about that. So tears pricked his eyes through the Force. You believe that, don't you? And, you know, he nodded and he kind of lied and said, of course I do. And so he's really struggling to believe that things are going to be okay. And I just want to give him the world's biggest hug and support him through that, because I think we've all felt that moment perhaps in the last year of, like, you know, trying to fool ourselves for a moment in time, for whatever it may be, that like things are okay in this moment when they definitely aren't. So I can relate to Bell's struggle in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a good character, deserves the world.
Yeah, he's really richly explored in this book, which I was pretty enthusiastic about, because he is great. He does have that depth, and yeah, again, I'm worried for everybody. Like Arzu said, you know, it's not going to be easy. It's a great disaster for a reason. So. All right, so we have two other excerpts here. There's one from Race to Crash Point Tower, which has the perspective of Lula Talisola and Vernestra Rowe, and the other is from Out of the Shadows, which is a Vernestra, Imri, Reith, Comac Vetus excerpt. So, you know, get really a little bit of everybody. Really get every MVP with the greats, I would say. These characters are just incredible. But Arzu, between these two, is there any that stuck out to you, or any quotes? What got you excited about these excerpts?
The one that really stood out to me was Vernestra's from Out of the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the excerpt, they are in hyperspace. She starts to have a vision, and then what jumped out at me was, before, when she was still a Padawan, having one of her attacks left her feeling shaken and scared, like she was somehow misusing the Force. Now Vernestra was just wondering why they were happening again. So we haven't seen Vernestra as a Padawan at all. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what that experience was like. We don't know what she faced at her trials, like none of that. All we know is she has this like ability, which I think is really interesting about High Republic Jedi in general, is that they have these special abilities that we don't really see in prequel era Jedi. And I think it's interesting that Vernestra, who does seem like she's going to be a very major character in the High Republic, because like she pops up in both our excerpts. So I think her having this skill that's not quite prophecy, but it's some sort of connection to the Force, is an extremely interesting avenue to pursue for her. And that's what jumped out to me about it.
Yeah, I think it also kind of places her among the pantheon, I guess, right? Like the talk of prophecy, when we talk about prophecy in Star Wars, I think two places that are essentially more or less related. Anakin, the chosen one, balanced to the Force, and then Kevin's other work, Dooku Jedi Lost, when there's talk about visions and prophecy and do we believe these? Do we not believe these?
And Master and Apprentice too.
Yes. How do they affect a person? And it's clear to me that this talk of prophecy weighs on her a little bit, at least just from this excerpt. These visions, it's clear that this vision is weighing on her. She's a bit confused by it, but also I think the proximity to the idea of prophecy is concerning, because she knows and we know that she is rather exceptional for her age, for her talents and abilities. She's young and she has a Padawan of her own. And so she's in this very unique, isolating position. And so I think that this acts as a way to further isolate her within herself. And I think it's pretty crazy that at the end of the excerpt, we see that the town that she just had the vision about, she sees destruction and Nile, attacking these citizens, that she is getting a direct vision of the immediate future, or like the present. And so whereas some visions might be more intangible, Anakin's vision of the birth of the twins, the birth of Padme's children, is a bit more obscured or different than what actually plays out in the end. But it seems like this is kind of a one-to-one experience for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is one point here where it says prophecy was no gift, rather many Force users saw it as a curse to be endured. So I thought that was really interesting, that she doesn't really see this ability as something that is good for her. It's actually quite infuriating. It literally says that, Emery frowned as the questions raged through Vernestra. And just that uncertainty of like, is this happening now? Is it happening in the future? Is somebody trying to reach out to me? Why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing this now? And, we already mentioned that Elzar kind of feels like an Anakin Skywalker type character. I also think Vernestra does too. And I think we're starting to see like a common theme that like many of these characters kind of are like Anakin Skywalker in a way. We see that just in Wave 1 itself. Like we see that with Emery when he has that sort of pull to the dark side after losing his master, and Vernestra being the youngest knighted Jedi in quite some time kind of gives me the chosen one vibes of like, oh, this is somebody who is like the best of the best, like represents how good the Jedi can be and like how powerful and like how they can ascend to the highest heights of their ranks very quickly. And now she's taking on a Padawan at the end of a test of courage. I got to imagine that's really hard. Like being a 17-year-old and being like, I'm entrusting this 15-year-old Padawan and I'm supposed to give him the answers. Like I'm 17. Like if I had to train somebody at 17 on how to be a person, they probably would have ended up being a very shitty person. Let me just say that, so I can't imagine it's easy on her. And I think when you have that sort of pressure placed on you, there is a breaking point, much like Anakin was tasked with just doing everything for everybody. Like, be a soldier, be a husband, be an apprentice, be the Chancellor's right-hand man. Like there's just so much that he has to be. He can't just be Anakin. And I feel like Vernestra is going to run into that. I feel like she's just going to have so many things that people expect her to be that she can't be Vernestra Rowe. She can't be herself. And that's what I'm kind of worried about with the visions. I think that will even cloud her judgment and her future even more. So yeah, the other excerpt is from Race to Crash Point Tower. I thought that was great. It's just more Vernestra content with Lula, and I think their kind of dynamic during that excerpt is really fun. And even throughout that book, I think they have a lot of great banter together. Some of my favorite conversations happen between them of anything in the High Republic. So I would say that's something to look forward to. Don't underestimate the middle grade genre for sure. That is something that is just as great as anything else. But I think now is a good time to turn it over to some of our listener Q&As that were sent to us. So we got a couple questions on Twitter, and I'd like to go through them now. So I'm going to start with at Lava Castle, and he asked, why is Marchion Rose so neat? Is it the mask, the mystery, the fur cape? Arzu, I just picked this one for you, I'm going to be honest. So I'm going to have you go.
It's all of it. It is the fashion icon status. It is the enigma of the man. It's the angry boy in a mask who might have a soul underneath all that anger and just the potential of what that promises. And it's, I don't know, there's a little bit of menace there, but it's like calculating menace. It's not like unstable menace, which I appreciate. And just sort of that you never quite know what's going on with him, but you really want to find out. This is not an I can fix him kind of way. That is not what I'm saying. I would just like to understand him. This is like very much my bread and butter is the angry dark-haired boy, as I like to say. So that was the appeal of Marchion Ro, and then the writers just went ahead and made him extremely interesting in the process. So
yeah, you said you don't see any character as irredeemable, and that applies to Marchion. Just kind of picking your brain here. I mean,
yeah,
he does some pretty bad shit.
I mean,
in Wave 1, you know? So like how do you
causes the legacy run disaster?
Yeah, like how do you come back from that? And I asked that as somebody who also believes in redemption and like a character like Kylo Ren. So I'm totally with you. I'm just kind of asking you for food for thought.
The thing is that I know this is a different era and it's maybe a little controversial. I think that hardly anybody is irredeemable. I think what sets Marchion Ro or Kylo Ren or anybody like that apart from somebody like Palpatine to me is Palpatine has grand personal schemes and he hurts people, specific people, on purpose. Like he targets people and hurts them. Whereas somebody like Marchion Ro or Kylo Ren, their scale of damage is so incomprehensibly large that none of it is targeted, none of it is specific. It's just the other side. So I feel like that is somebody who got lost in dogma, in their own cause, in a concept, and has caused a lot of destruction on the way. So I think coming back from falling too deep in your concept is possible, but specifically targeted pain on specific individuals is much harder to come back from, even though the scale of damage is maybe perhaps not as large.
Yeah, Palpatine is more intimate. For
it's
sure.
Very like, I mean, the man started the Clone Wars and who knows how many billions died during the Clone Wars, but his every action seems specifically targeted to hurt certain people to permit his rise to power. And this is just my take on it.
Yeah.
But that's where I think it differs with somebody like Kylo Ren or somebody like Marchion Ro is that it's so large, it's impersonal. It's like Luke blowing up the Death Star and everybody always says, well, what about the person who was just mopping the floor? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's so incomprehensibly large and it's not personal. It's war. So
it's just a heightened sense of
it's
emotion.
Very heightened.
You know,
that's the thing. Is it doesn't feel heightened when Palpatine does it, but it feels very heightened when Marchion does it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a great point. The heightenedness of it all allows us to reflect in a much more intimate way, whereas the intimate nature of the viciousness gives us a very kind of
vitriolic reaction, like just very like
a very personal kind of discomfort, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously it's different for different people, but I would generally agree with your assessment. And I find the way that you put that into words, I have to be like very thoughtful and a good way to take, I think, a concept that a lot of us in our brain have been talking about and thinking about for so long to just pluck it out and put it on a nice little platter and make it look good. Because I think that there is a really valid conversation to have within like redemption, especially within high fantasy, completely separate from the actions of our own world.
Yeah, like that's the thing.
Kind of stories.
If somebody in our real world caused something like the legacy run, like there is no coming back from that. That is just. But this is high fantasy, and I know we all roll our eyes at it's fake and in space, but it is like it is so removed from the reality we live in that we have that leeway to be more forgiving and to not make excuses, but sort of to rationalize things and to see each point of view. Like we don't have to necessarily fall on one side of the conflict in fiction. So that's what I appreciate about it.
Exactly. I would agree. Blue Milk Mama at Blue Milk Mama asks, am I going to cry after reading The Rising Storm? Or will I be too shocked to cry? Will I hate Kevin Scott forever? Or will I just think he's brilliant? This is a complicated set of questions. As Brad and I mentioned earlier, we kind of laughed. I don't know what your reaction was, Arzu, after you finished Rising Storm. Shock, yeah. So you might be too shocked to cry, but you may also cry, and I think that would be a totally valid response considering the entirety, the whole 400 pages of that book.
Yeah.
Will you hate having Kevin Scott? Maybe you'll hate him a little bit, but not in any like serious way, because you'll just admire what he just did in the worst way.
Yeah, it's like when you hate somebody for just like,
how?
This is so good. I hate you. It's so good. It's just, how did you do it? I'd say yes to all four of those. Arzu, how are you feeling?
I'm thinking you might cry in the middle, in shock by the end. You will hate Kevin Scott for making you feel everything that you are feeling. And then when that sort of numbs, then you're just going to think he's brilliant.
Yeah. You hate him because he is so brilliant.
You hate him because of how brilliant he is. Exactly.
Yeah.
Kevin, we love you. Full disclaimer. Yeah, of course.
I think we have to have a moment. Maybe we can get on like Twitter Spaces or something where we all just like, those of us who have read the book, just laugh, like all maniacally laugh together and be like, what? What? So we can kind of get that out because I think as everybody reads the book, we're all going to need that release in some way, because it's a ride. It's like you're riding all of the coasters at Cedar Point one after another.
And just throwing up all the time. Yeah. Let's okay, here it is, folks. You heard it here first. Next Tuesday on June 29th, join us for our full 24-hour Twitter Spaces live stream where we're just going to cry. Just for the whole time.
Cry and scream. And
I'd be fascinated to like actually put a recorder on myself while reading though, because while I like for these two books specifically, like Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm, the Del Rey High Republic novels, I have had such ridiculous audible reactions to these books. Like there was a moment in this book where I was sitting in bed, like looking at this, like reading the character and their actions, and I was just like, what are you doing? Like out loud. My brothers, my family can probably hear me and they're like, is she okay? And here I am like, no, don't do that. into my book at like midnight.
Oh God, we'll never recover. Our next question here is from @LeviRab. He is a patron of Friends of the Force. So he asks, this is shaping up to be one of my favorite eras of Star Wars, and I know it's striking that way for a lot of other folks. What do you think it is about the High Republic that makes it hit so strongly with fans? And I think this will be a good final question here. So Arzu, I'd love to start with you. I think this is a good question to end on, especially because just kind of encompasses like why we're here talking about the High Republic.
I think it's hitting for a lot of fans because it's like we said earlier, it's so removed from the rest of the story that if you are kind of in the life with Star Wars, then you have that interest. If you are newer to Star Wars, like to Lucasfilm Publishing, this is a great entry point. And then just to having it be so removed and not being beholden to any plot points we're already familiar with, it is a wide open playground, and they can just weave this really intricate story together in this new era that almost feels like it's like a period piece to the Star Wars we know already, which I think is what's so great is it doesn't feel like home. It doesn't feel like the present day. It feels like a fantasy for us and for the people of the Star Wars galaxy. And I think just having that fresh sort of playground to tell this fantasy within a fantasy that we all know is going to end up with a lot of pain. Like if those excerpts are any indication, it's going to hurt, but it's good pain, I guess. And I think that's why it's hitting so strong.
Yeah. Smile. I think of like the don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. I'll be like, by the end of this, it'll be like, cry because it happened, but also smile because it happened.
Yeah, smile because it's
I can't hurt you anymore.
We've all hit our pain limit, for the last 5 years or whatever. We're going to be 5 years older than we are now. And we're going to be like holding our stack of books. We're going to be like, that was enough. Thank God. Okay, love you all. But like, whew.
My therapist, the High Republic isn't real. It can't hurt you. I'm like, yes, it can. Yes, it can.
Bring in my multiple copies of every single one of the books. Be like, I'm fine. This is fine.
I think to answer Levi's question, I think just the fact that it's so far removed and it gives us something new. I think Star Wars has needed new, bold storytelling for a while. I love everything that's coming out for the most part. Like, I love the Bad Batch. I love that we're getting, like Kenobi and Andor, but we really, really, really needed something fresh and new and something to make this galaxy look a little different while having some anchors that we know, like the Republic or like Yoda or like Yariel Poof. Dang. But I think that makes it special and why people are like, I don't have to really understand the Star Wars timeline as it's been. I can just jump into this and I can start with a new timeline, and that's why it's accessible. And Star Wars needs to be accessible. I think Marvel is accessible in a lot of ways. It's becoming increasingly dense, but I think that's kind of natural for things to happen that way because, as you get deeper into these stories, and I think the High Republic will probably have the same thing. It's going to get even denser as we get into phase 2 and 3. And it's kind of be more of an inside baseball sort of thing where you really do need to read it, but it gives people a new starting point is, I think, the primary reason that it's a hit. So, Sarah, any final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I would just say that for me, what makes it, so exciting and why it's become so quickly one of my favorite eras in Star Wars is just because of possibility. I think, as we've all said here in the past, hour and a half, there's a lot of stories in Star Wars or a lot of ancillary stories that we kind of know where they have to end because we know where that character goes. We know where they're headed. We know some other aspect of their life. But with these characters, there is such room for possibility. It's part of the reason why I loved the Alphabet Squadron trilogy so much. There was so much possibility for those characters. Are they going to live? Are they going to die? If they live, what's the future? If they die, how does everybody deal with that? It's the same thing here. And I'm really excited to, get to further know these characters as people and like what makes them tick and what scares them and who do they love and why do they love the things, the people that they love. And there's just so many wide open doors here. And that's really exciting. And the fact that we know we're going to get multiple years worth of storytelling in this particular time period is thrilling and honestly makes me go after like reading The Rising Storm, after reading Wave 1 and Wave 2 books, just say to myself, how are they going to top this? Every single time I read something. And like, that's a really thrilling feeling. Like, how are they going to one up themselves when they've clearly like hit a peak? There's a taller peak, it's very exciting.
Speaking of the door being wide open, Sarah, I think that's a great place to really close out here and talk about what's next and why we're excited for what's to come. So Wave 2 has a lot more in store. So again, June 29th, Race to Crash Point Tower and the Rising Storm comes out. July 21st will be the High Republic Adventures number 6, which is going to feature Leax, Gyasi, and Geode in comic form. Geode! So excited. July 28th, Out of the Shadows. And August 31st, The Tempest Runner audiobook original by Kevin Scott. September 7th, The Edge of Balance by Justina Ireland and Shima Shinya. And October 5th, Showdown at the Fair by George Mann, which is more of a children's book, kind of flip through picture book, which are great. Have stickers at the end of them. Give me my Elzar Mann sticker, let me just say.
For less than $6. I mean,
incredible.
Stickers, a book plus stickers. Love it.
Yes. And we are also getting part of the Star Wars Adventures Tales of Villainy series. We're getting a Daniel Jose Older prequel comic featuring Dr. Udursand and Marcion Rowe, and figuring out what's going on with those two guys, because they are conniving individuals. So most importantly, though, on June 28th, so 1 week from today's episode, when it's released, June 28th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, there's a High Republic panel. So this was done back in January as well, the day before the launch. I expect a ton of announcements at this panel. It's probably the thing I'm most anticipating at this point in time right now. I'm just so excited. Like last time we got, all of the next book announcements, what they were called. We got some covers as well. So I imagine we're going to get an announcement of Wave 3. Somebody actually asked Charles Soule on Twitter. They asked him, do you know if we can expect an announcement for Wave 3? And Charles said, yes, I do. So this kind of confirms to me the High Republic is going to be a trilogy of trilogies. We're going to have 3 waves for each phase. And this next wave is going to close out phase 1, which is called Light of the Jedi. And then phase 2 will begin called Quest of the Jedi. So Arzu, I want to hear your thoughts on just, is there anything that you're most excited for after these set of books? And also, what are your thoughts and speculations on Wave 3? Do you think it's going to be a trilogy of trilogies? And what do you think the timeline might be?
I was actually thinking about this earlier, and I agree. I think it is going to be a trilogy of trilogies. I think Wave 3, if I had to guess, would probably cap off everybody at this point in their life. And then when we get to Wave 2, it'll probably be like a generational shift. So all of our adults will be provided everybody survives, all of our adults will be, elderly, and all our teenagers will be the adults, and they'll be the masters, and then they'll have a whole new set of Padawans to carry us through that second wave.
Interesting.
And I think it's going to be like a generational changeover. My only thought is we've only got 3. So, and it's 250 years worth of time. So I don't know if this is going to take us right up to the Phantom Menace, now that I say that out loud. But that's what I think is it's going to be, almost like us growing up with them, but in a very, very condensed time period. Because obviously, 5 to 10 years of publishing is not growing up. But that's where I think it's going. And then after this set of books, I'm just sort of hoping that they not keep to this format. What am I saying? I hope that they continue to push the format the way they are doing with Wave 2, like with an audio drama and with these side comics and things like that, because I think that's a great way to keep expanding on this limitless space that we have to play in right now.
Do you think they'll keep the same authors, or are they going to change it up for each phase? Are they going to kind of hand the reins off to say, hey, now a new generation of writers who have proven themselves in Star Wars publishing? What does your High Republic look like?
I actually really like that. I hadn't thought about that, but I really like that idea. I also hope for the next wave that Claudia Gray comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love what we've gotten for Wave 2. Please do not mistake me, but I just miss Claudia Gray. So in addition to that, I would not replace anything we got, but she is missed. So I hope she comes back for the next wave.
What do you think her secret project is that she's working on?
If I can say anything, I want it to be an Obi-Wan book.
Same.
I can't be objective about this. This is what I hope she is working on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious if she's writing the next. It's either that or the next adult novel for Wave 3 to close us out. That's my two theories. But we'll see.
I think she might be doing something not in books.
Also possible.
Something High Republic that is not a book. Because her secrecy around when she's like, I am doing something and I can't say a single thing about it. I don't know. I was just maybe thinking it's not a book.
Yeah. That'd be crazy, if they're doing a animated series for High Republic and she was writing episodes for it. That would be batshit crazy. I would die.
I would lose it.
I don't know. We're just in speculation land here, so
we don't know anything.
I'm dreaming big, But I think for me, I will say that I also think this might be a trilogy of trilogies. A saga, perhaps. But I don't really know. And I think it'll be really interesting to find out, because we know we're going to probably transition over to Quest sometime next year is kind of what has been hinted to us. So when next year? I don't know. There's just a lot of, I would love to be a little fly on the wall in the okay, we're building out the structure of the next however many years. And that sounds very exciting.
What if Quest drops at Celebration?
That's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling Quest in this Chili's tonight at Anaheim. In Anaheim.
At the Anaheim Chili's.
Yes. That's what I think. Yeah. I think we're going to
be a Chili's around Anaheim. I mean, the Anaheim Chili's. I don't know. We'll find it. We'll go.
Okay, forget Denny's. We're doing Friends of the Forest Chili's now. I actually would be more of a fan of that. But Arzu, I 100,000% agree with you. I think we're going to get a huge High Republic panel at Celebration. We're probably going to get some exclusive books dropping there early because like Master and Apprentice dropped like a week or two early at Celebration Chicago. So I'd imagine the same thing's going to happen. They're going to have those con exclusives ready. Like, the Del Rey novel 1 for phase 2 exclusive out of print version at Celebration. Like, give it to me. And the fact that if this is a trilogy of trilogies, that means 9 books, like a 9-book saga. That's like mind-boggling to me to think about. But one of the best things Star Wars could do at this point. And I think we'll get Wave 3 in January, and then we'll have that 5 to 6 month gap leading us to May for phase 2 launch. So I don't envy those writers. Those are some tight deadlines. So
yeah, honestly though, I'm like, they're amazing. Yeah. They're amazing.
Yeah.
I know the Star Wars writers have very quick turnarounds from concept to finished product, and their work ethic and their output, nothing but admiration for quite literally every single one of them.
Yeah. So stay tuned to that High Republic live stream next week. It's going to be a big one. Sarah and I will be posting like a instant reaction podcast episode afterwards. So like stay tuned for that. We're just going to kind of chat about the news, and hopefully there's enough news to chat about. So I have a feeling we're going to get some big stuff. So
if not, then there's not going to be an episode, and you'll be like, where'd that episode go? And we'll just be like, what episode?
You didn't hear it from us. I don't know what you're talking about. There is no episode in Bossing Say. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. So Arzu, thank you so much for joining us, and we're so excited to preview Wave 2 with you. We know you're a huge book fan and a High Republic fan, so we couldn't have picked a better person for this. So last thing I want to ask you is, where can our folks find you online, and how will you be covering the High Republic? So if people are sick of listening to Sarah and I and want something different,
which I don't know how they aren't already.
3-hour episodes can get pretty long. So where can I get their other?
Is fun.
Yeah. So what's going on with you?
So yeah, if you want to find me talking about Marc-Jean Rowe, Ben Solo, and occasionally other things, you can find me on Twitter at Arzu Amin. You can also find me my own site, arzud2.com, and that's where I will be covering the High Republic, like spoilers. So that will be after the books come out. I'll give it about a week or so, and then that will be there. I will have links to spoiler-free reviews on thegeekywaffle.com if you just kind of want to get a sense of that. So that's also on my site. Speaking of the Geeky Waffle, you can find me hosting Space Waffles on the Geeky Waffle Network, and we will be doing a in-depth, spoiler-ridden High Republic breakdown at some point after Out of the Shadows comes out, so that we can just get into all of it without worrying about saying something by accident. So that's how we are covering the High Republic at the Geeky Waffle, and how I'm covering it personally.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited to see what you're going to be writing soon, because your reviews thus far have been really great. So yeah, awesome. Sarah, what about you? Where can our listeners find you online for all your Star Wars opinions?
Well, you can find my Star Wars opinions on my Instagram at Sarah's Puzzled Pages, and sometimes on my Twitter at SCH221, and definitely not on Goodreads and Letterboxd, except maybe a little bit on Goodreads. Also at SCH221, but mostly on the podcast is really what I'm trying to say.
Yes, you'll be here on July 5th when we drop our Rising Storm spoiler discussion episode. So if you're excited to hear our thoughts on the High Republic, we're going to be dropping that right after the 4th of July. So after you're spending all day cooking hot dogs and burgers, you can then listen to us in your food coma state. So prepare yourselves. But as for me, you can find me on Twitter, and you can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a rating and review wherever you listen. and subscribe to the podcast so you get all those High Republic episodes right when they drop.
And we also have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1 a month. And we're so grateful to all our patrons: Adam, Amy, Anna, Brian with an I, Brian with a Y, Cheryl, Deborah, Donnie, Elegy, Jesse, Knights of Ren, Huang, Levi, Lindsay, Lucy, Marie Claire, Neil, Rachel, Sarah, Saber Bouquet, Sky Talkers, and T. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Once again, Arzu, thank you for joining us. Hopefully it won't be the last time you're here on Friends of the Force. It was such a pleasure. For all of you out there listening, thank you once again. And until next time, we are all the Republic.
Bye.